Afternoon, everybody. So glad that you took the time today to join us for another Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts Leaders Over Lunch conversation. Today, you are in for an incredible conversation with a dear friend and colleague who I'm going to talk about in a moment. But first of all, let me just say I'm proud to be here. For those of you that I don't know, I'm Keith Motley, most of the time coming to you as Chancellor Emeritus or Distinguished Professor at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, but today coming to you as a consultant and President and CEO of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, and someone who's honored to co-host, host, or whatever it takes to lead this Leaders Over Lunch conversation most days. So welcome to today's conversation. You know, we've had some incredible conversations in the past. We had our National League, our National Urban League President Mark Mariel join us. We've had our Secretary of Labor here in the Commonwealth. We've had our last session, which was incredible, where we talked about health, staying healthy during this time. But now we've also come today where we're going to talk to you about living your life in balance, even in this COVID, in these COVID times. So remember, there is a question and answer section of this that you can go to the chat and you can sort of ask questions. I know lots of you have been writing saying, you don't even look at the chat, Dr. Motley. What are you doing? All those guys, we're getting better and better and better. Last session, I think we asked about 5 questions from the chat. So let's see if we can even improve on that today. This is an hour-long show. We want you to enjoy your lunch. If you're like me, grab some tea, some coffee, or whatever you drink, some water, and then just sit here and enjoy and, learn with us and learn with me today. So just a little bit about Leaders Over Lunch. This is a conversation with women and men who are at the top of their A game in business, government, community development, religion, etc. We bring you on this program and we share you with our community. Our goal is to have a candid conversation about our strengths, our weaknesses, our strengths and our opportunities, all those things that are important to us as we all work to build community. And today we have an incredible guest with us. That guest is Dr. Joan Wallace-Benjamin. Yes, indeed, Dr. Benjamin is coming home today to the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts to be with us. She's an incredible nonprofit executive here in Boston and beyond. She was president of the Home for Little Wanderers from May 2003 until her retirement. And we never retire, but until her retirement in 2018. She's a trustee at Wellesley College and also a graduate of Wellesley College. So she's got them boxed in a couple ways. She experienced it, and now she's working to improve upon their excellence. She's a member of the board of overseers at the Heller School for Social Policy and Management, where she also went and now is engaged at a leadership level. She's been a corporation member at Northeastern University and a trustee at Pine Manor College, 2 incredible institutions here in the city. She graduated from Wellesley, as I said, and also got her PhD from the Heller School. Prior to joining the home in 2003, she served as a consultant with Whitehead Mann, a global executive recruiting firm. So she knows about recruiting. She knows about leading in the space. She knows about being on a board and serving and leading boards. What an incredible person to have with us today. But the most important thing, she's been able to build the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts for 11 years as our president and our chief executive officer here. We're so proud of that legacy. She was director of operations for the Boys and Girls Club of Boston before we sort of stole her to bring her over to us. And then, of course, she has a long resume. What I'm also proud of is when we were able to have our governor, Governor Deval Patrick, elected as governor of this great Commonwealth. He was wise enough to bring in, to help him transition into that role as his chief of staff, Dr. Joan Wallace-Benjamin. So we're going to get started in a minute with Joan. She's smiling, she's ready to go. But I see somebody else who came into the screen for a minute. I think that looks like the chair of the board of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, Joseph Feaster Jr. Chair Feaster, is that you?
Yes, it is there, Dr. Motley. I wouldn't miss this opportunity, but I regret that I couldn't be there co-hosting with you and to be able to greet our distinguished former president and CEO of the Urban League and distinguished person here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as you've just noted, Dr. Joan Wallace-Benjamin. And so I just wanted to give my greetings. I know you're going to have an excellent program, an excellent topic. Dr. Joan Wallace-Benjamin, I just want to say to you that you have been a pillar in this community. I've known you for a long, long time. And I certainly am glad and pleased that you are still continuing to work with us at the Urban League. There are some things that you and Dr. Motley are working on, which I'm sure he's going to explore, and I'm not going to steal the thunder of. But I just want to come on now to say to you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wish you a happy holiday season, and to say the same to the viewers of today, that I wish them a happy holiday. And as always, wear your mask. All right there, Dr. Motley, I turn it back to you, sir.
Well, I have a great appointment, and
Okay.
glad to see you, man. You
All right.
take care.
Take care.
And so, Dr. Joan Wallace-Benjamin, how are you?
I'm just fine, Keith. How are you?
How you surviving through this COVID, huh?
Well, like everybody else, doing the best I can. I just want to thank you, though, for inviting me to participate in this afternoon. I have been on several of the Leaders Over Lunch series, and they're interesting. And so I'm honored that you've asked me to come.
Well, we're always honored to see you, and we're so grateful. And I must say that you are looking well during this COVID. And this has been a tough time, and so I'm glad to see that you and your family have been moving forward. But I'm also so proud of you, as somebody who's been in the academy for a long time and knows what it takes and the effort it takes to develop something that you can pass on to the world as a gift from you as you unpack your soul. What a great thing to have is this book done. I know you've been working and working to get it done. It is wonderful. And so I just want to have an opportunity to just sort of have a conversation about that today. So when I was checking it out, I noticed that your book is filled with stories about your life and the lessons that you learned from that life. So I tried to explain to folk, and I did it from more of your leadership space, who you are. Tell these folk who Dr. Joan Wallace-Benjamin is. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a little girl from Queens, New York, and I grew up in the borough of Queens in Long Island City, and then later in Jamaica with my younger brother and both of my parents. I spent sort of my weekdays in Queens, but every weekend I spent with my grandparents who lived in Harlem. So I was in Manhattan every weekend of the year, back and forth, with a very large and loving and supportive extended family. I went to Public School 111. Actually, it was the opening scene of the Cosby Show, the school they show at the beginning. That's Public School 111. And I went there until the 6th grade. My mother Vivian Wallace was a teacher at school. She taught fourth grade. And so for the first 6 years of schooling, no one knew my name. I was simply Miss Wallace's daughter. And it remained that until I left in the sixth grade. And then we moved out to Jamaica. I went to an independent school out in the 5 towns of Long Island at Woodmere Academy, and was there until I graduated from high school and selected Wellesley College as the college I would come to. So I arrived here in Boston, kind of an old, dusty, not so friendly city in 1971, and was on the campus and graduated in 75. I love my time at Wellesley. It's a spectacular women's institution. So very proud of my time there. I was a psychology major and decided I wanted to do some work in community mental health. And I went to the Heller School on a mental retardation fellowship, and wrote a dissertation that contributed to that leadership about Black mothers' attitudes and expectations toward their moderately retarded children. Sort of the first of the kind in the literature. And then, sort of went to work after I got my PhD in 1980 and started at Head Start, and then Boys and Girls Clubs, and then the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, and then the Whitehead Band, as you said, and the Home for Little Wanderers, and concluded my career in 2018. So I'm just a New York girl that,
Well, what I love about it is how you write so lovingly about your family and that experience, and grandma and them and grandpop and them and your mama and them. But I also noticed you have a whole lot of pictures in there that reveal a whole lot. And so, when I was looking at them, they were just so wonderful to see the joy. And as you mentioned, those Sundays with grandparents and those weekends, that's a tradition that exists all over this country during that period, and one that we miss so much during COVID and all of that. So talk to us a little bit about why you wrote this book. I know a lot of people do it because of the ego gratification that comes from, I produced this book, I'm this, I'm that. But why did you do this? Why did you write this book?
Well, it's a leadership memoir is how it's referred to. And, if you think about it, Keith, our parents were members of the greatest generation. And you and I are members of the baby boom generation, as are several people, I'm sure, that are on this call. And the baby boom generation is a really, really spectacular generation in and of itself. If you think about all of us, and I'm talking about particularly women and people of color, we were the first to do a lot of things. We were the first to go to schools of our choices. We were first to be able to live in neighborhoods that we wanted to. As a woman, we were among the first that could go to Wall Street, could go to law school, could go to medical school. Our options really did open up with the civil rights movement and with affirmative action policy that kicked open the door. And a lot of us walked through that door. And in fact, were instrumental in helping to create a professional African-American community, a middle-class community, African-American community. So we really did important things. We also saw a lot in our growing up. I mean, both Kennedys were assassinated. We saw Martin Luther King assassinated. We saw Malcolm X assassinated. We saw the Panthers killed. We saw protests for civil rights, the war in Vietnam. I mean, we were a generation that, you kind of wonder, was there some trauma involved in everything that we saw? We saw leadership people assassinated for their beliefs. And what does that really say to us, or what did it say to us as a generation? But I think we persevered, we moved forward. And so I wanted to highlight in the book, and the reason why the family pictures and some of the family information is there, because I wanted to just set a context for, how as an African-American woman, baby boomer, civil rights beneficiary, I grew up and was able to merge together the life with my family, the values that I was taught, the things that I believe in, with the roles of leadership that I've played. And I think that they're very balanced. Leading a life in balance is a way to balance that family set of experiences and understandings with the leadership role that you might be playing professionally. So I had time after retirement. I had a lot of ideas in my head. Having been the first or only in most places where I've ever been, both in school and on the job, I had some stories to tell and some things to say about that. And so I just sat down and decided to write it.
And write it you did. And what a wonderful piece. For those who haven't read it, please, once you pick it up, you can't put it down. But I'm a little concerned. You talked about me being a baby boomer. You're
Pardon?
outing me on this. You're outing me on this program with you. I thought I was a millennial or something like that. But we'll talk to, or a Generation X or something. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But early in the book, you talk about the Efficacy Institute, and you talk about things that you learned from the Efficacy Institute. So what are some of the major takeaways that you learned from that experience that
Right.
you want to share with the audience?
The Efficacy Institute was founded by Dr. Jeffrey Howard. And it's a theory of development that I actually took the training, the 3-day training that the Institute offers, and came away with it like sort of blown away and with an aha moment about how we might use this theory of development to work with the people at the Urban League. And I also figured out how to use it in working with my own family and my sons. In short, it's kind of a complex theory, but in short, it says that confidence is the fuel of development, that the stronger one's confidence, the harder one works, the more one develops. You develop, your confidence is even more buttressed, you work harder, you develop. And so it's think you can, work hard, get smart. And the theory also says that intelligence is not innate and fixed at birth. I mean, everyone thinks, you were born smart or you're born not so smart. That's not the case. Intelligence is built over a lifetime. And if you can build confidence into people and they learn how to work hard enough, their confidence can improve and their development improves. And it means you can literally learn everything. So the fact that schools sort and select the bluebirds, the redbirds, and the blackbirds, whatever they do in the reading groups, and we track kids in school is really folly. Because if you can speak a human language by the time you're 3, you are able to learn calculus. You are able to speak multiple languages. But we in American education tend to limit what our kids are able to do. And so that theory really turned on a light for me. And we brought that theory to the Urban League in our job readiness training program. And so the participants in the program took basically an Efficacy Institute training series that basically said to them, and the people that were in the class were mostly young, out of work or underemployed African-American men and women, most of who had not had a very pleasant experience in school because they had been sorted into the bluebirds, blackbirds, and redbirds, and felt like they perhaps couldn't achieve. And we were there to tell them that is not true, that they absolutely can achieve, and let us teach you this process of development so that you can develop over a lifetime and get better and stronger. And we sent many of the graduates from that program to employment opportunity. George Russell from State Street Bank was our board chairman at the time. He opened doors at State Street for State Street to hire our graduates. And we sent people to companies across the city. And they were very effective on the job. It was not skills training specifically. We did do that later at the League in the technology center, but it was soft skills, what we call soft skills, which are not soft at all. They are really hard skills of how to work with a group of people, how to collaborate, how to show up on time, how to be dressed appropriately, how to speak. You can't cuss out the boss. You have to deal with things.
You can't?
No, you can't. You have to deal with things in a certain way. And so those soft skills were so important, and they're often neglected. And so many of our young people would go on the job and, kind of flame out. It wouldn't work. They wouldn't stay. The company would let them go, a whole range of things. And so we felt that the job readiness training was actually more important in a lot of ways than hardcore skills training. We did do both, but we really sort of put a niche, a stake in the ground around soft skills. And it was very successful. And the Efficacy Institute theory was at the core of it.
Yeah, and so someone in the chat is asking me to ask you, they're saying, Dr. Motley, please ask Dr. Joan Wallace-Benjamin if she believes that leaders are born, or is there a leader's gene?
No, I don't think leaders are born, and I don't think there's a leader gene. What I do think is that confident people can lead. And so to the extent that you're able to develop this notion of confidence and the notion that I can do anything and I'm prepared to work as hard as necessary to get it done, are what leaders are about. That's what a leader does. A leader that's confident can follow people. You know, most effective leaders are good followers. They can follow people. They can work on a team. They know how, they don't have to be the smartest person in the room because they've hired the smartest people to come into the room with them. They know how to chart a course. They know how to think about a vision. But the confidence is what allows them to do that. So it's not, you know, you're not born with it and there's no gene, but you can develop leadership skills and you can get better and stronger at that because the best leaders, I think, are confident people.
Well, you know, you start this book out so wonderfully with all this about family. So, what role do you believe that family plays in the success of a leader?
So I think your family is critical to your success as a leader. I mentioned in the book, one of the chapters, I have a Congolese saying that says, a single bracelet does not jingle.
Mm.
And that's true. And the best leaders are those that have several bracelets on their wrists and that jingle all day long. And those people on your list are your family and your good friends, people who think you know, you're on top of the world, who think you're the very best. Everybody needs somebody or some set of people that just think they are the best. People who are willing to give you honest feedback, who are, you know, ready to say, you know, Joan, that really, you know, no, I don't think so. And people that will support you through the hard times and the good times. And family members are those people, your children, your spouse, if you have one, extended family members, grandparents, just everybody help to buttress your leadership and enhance the ability to lead and lead effectively. I remember when our boys were growing up, I think one was 2 and 6, I think, when I started at the Urban League. So I was a young leader with really young children. My children became a big part of the work. We would dress them up and my husband and I would take them with us to this event or this march or that march, because that was kind of the connection between what was happening out in the world and what was happening in my own family. When I was at the Home for Little Wanderers, my boys were teenagers, but I was working with young teenagers, boys and girls, in the child welfare system. The comparison between what I was doing at home, my husband and I were doing at home, with what was happening to the kids in the child welfare system was striking. But having that home experience and having experience with my children made me a more effective, sensitive, and interesting, I think, leader for the Home for Little Wanderers. So I think you have to combine your family. You have to give equal time to your family that you give to your job. And it's so interesting to me that we rarely ask men, what is it like to balance work and family? It's not even a question we ask. The question always is to women, how do you balance your work and how do you balance your family? And I think actually the guys would do better if they made their family and their work of equal
a priority, right?
Yeah, a priority. And so you have to make time for both, not more time for one than the other. The balance is in trying to balance the attention that you provide to both. Your job and your leadership is stronger, and your family, I think, becomes stronger.
So unpack that a little bit more for me then, you know, this notion of work-life balance and why it could be so helpful to everybody, not just something that's consistently asked of women as they've gotten into the role. How do you manage, how does one manage work-life balance? I see that's all over the front of your book when you talk about leading a life in balance. So how does one manage that?
Well, so I mean, it is what I've just previously said, that you have to make the commitment and the time that you give to your family equal with the time and commitment that you give to the job. One of the things I would say to men and to women is, you know, I've often been asked, can you have it all? You know, mostly, can women have it all? Can men have it all? And my answer to that is yes, I do think you can have it all. I think if you make a list of all the things in your life that you want, your bucket list, you know, I want to be able to travel, I want a house, I want my kids to go to a good school, you know, whatever the list is, make the list. And yes, you can, with commitment and thought, you can have everything on your list. The difference is you can't have it all at the same time. Okay. So if I think about my list, I have gotten everything that I put on my list, including being able to retire comfortably. But I'm 67 years old.
Mm.
So I didn't accomplish all that at 30. And actually, if you think about it, what fun would it be if you had everything you ever wanted at 30 years old? Well, wouldn't that
But hold up.
yeah.
You did accomplish something that was really spectacular in your 30s, which was to become the CEO of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts
Yeah.
at 35 years old.
Yeah.
What were some of the lessons that you learned so early in your career as a leader? You know, and
Yeah.
I know everyone always asks the question, what would you tell your younger self now? All that kind of stuff. You can weave all of that into it. But the reality is, what were some of the lessons that you learned as you were asked to lead at such an early age, such an incredible in long-serving institution within our community? What were some of those lessons?
Well, I think a big important lesson, both as a young woman at 35, but also even if you're older, is to try and listen more than talk. Um, listen more than talk. Surround yourself with really, really interesting, talented, and intelligent people. I always believe that if I had to think it all up and do your job, I don't need you. So I hired people who knew what
Can you say that one more time, please?
if I have to think it up and I have to execute it all, I don't need you. So your job is to do what we've hired you to do. So you want a really strong group of people to surround you and to help you. You want to be able to make a decision, I think is a big lesson, particularly young and female in leadership. I couldn't be wishy-washy. If I was wishy-washy, I'd have been eaten alive.
Right.
And wishy-washiness, people see the blood in the water and they go after you. And so you have to be decisive and you have to be able to make a decision, calculated risk involved, and think it all through, but be able to make a decision. What else did I learn? You have to be patient. I mean, my mother would always tease me and say, Joan, people don't walk and talk as fast as you do. Just slow down, slow down. Everybody can't move at the same pace. And so I think you do have to consider that people move at different paces. You get performance out of people in different ways, just like children learn differently in school from one another. And so you have to be patient and you have to see that the work, particularly in the human services sector, the work like at the Urban League and in all the other places where I worked, the work is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You have to be around to do the long haul work. The change that we made at the Urban League, that we're making at the Urban League now, and any other organization, is kind of plodding, hard, sometimes slow work. But it's that way if it's going to last. So I think you want to think about it as running this marathon, and that you can't sprint right through it. And I think the older I got, the more comfortable I got with that as a leader. But in the beginning, as a new leader, I was probably more impatient than I should have been. And that I learned that you got, slow down. You got to bring people along with you. If you're out front and you look behind you and the troops are not there, you haven't done it properly. So I mean, those are a couple of the things I could say that I,
well, what I remember going on during that period, as someone who was involved with the Urban League as a board member and as a supporter, the Rodney King riots had sort of broken out in all over the country. Police were brutally, it sounds familiar, beating up our people on national TV, were getting acquitted, all those kinds of things. And then, the riots were prevented here in Boston through the collaboration of you as president of the Urban League and many other organizations, including the NAACP here in Boston, who executed the 10 Commandments. Talk to us, and because I don't want some of our listeners or people that are viewing today to think that this all just started today. Talk to us about the lessons learned from that 10 Commandment experience then, and about leadership and the relationship with the community through this historic achievement around the 10 Commandments and, in keeping calm here in Boston.
Right. Well, I'll never forget, the the policemen were acquitted, and it all broke loose across America. And I remember that the Urban League staff was away. The whole affiliate had gone to the regional conference, which I think was in Syracuse or somewhere up north. And I stayed behind. When the verdict came in, I said, maybe I need to stay here just in case, something jumps off. So I stayed behind. I was in the Urban League offices by myself. Diane Wilkerson, who was the president of the NAACP at the time, and Reverend Eugene Rivers, who was a board member at the Urban League at the time. We all spoke to one another. I forget even how we got on the phone together, and we said, okay, what are we going to do? There was concern, of course, in the news that violence break out here in Boston. The mayor, the governor, people, the business community, they just did not want that. And so I remember sitting around the conference room in the Urban League offices at 88 Warren Street, and the three of us kind of was thinking through, what did we think we could do? Now, the 10 Commandments were all things that were in existence already. We didn't have to sit and create new ideas. We had lots of things that were being promised, that had been discussed, that were on the drawing board, that were of interest to the African-American community, and they hadn't gone anywhere. And we said, okay, well, why don't we surface those things? And why don't we use the desire on the part of political and business leadership to keep things calm here in Boston as a way to get these agenda items met? And so we wrote them down, and we had a huge meeting at Madison Park High School. Over 400 people showed up. We announced the 10 Commandments. The name was kind of catchy. I remember I thought of the name in the shower that afternoon. And I said, oh, the 10 Commandments, why don't we try that? It's demands, they were demands, but they had a commandment feel to them because they were what was right and what was good. And we delivered the 10 Commandments to this huge audience at Madison Park High School. And it just took off. People could resonate with all of the things that were in the commandments. We moved to the number one commandment, the community taking responsibility for itself. A war on apathy and irresponsibility, where we owned it and said, that's not what we want to do. We'll do our part, and the rest of the community and business and political people need to do their part. We broke into committees, we promulgated the commandments, we had several press conferences about it. I mean, it was actually fabulous. I think it did a couple of things. It showed the African-American community in particular that its two civil rights organizations, the Urban League and the NAACP, could in fact come together in a really strong and collaborative way to move something forward for our community. And so I think part of it was that people liked the fact that Joan and Diane were standing there together, arm in arm, and not in opposition to one another, but cooperatively and collaboratively to move something forward. We involved the community. We had a committee structure where people from the community could join the different demandment committees to work it, to figure out how to get it achieved. We delivered 10 Commandment treaties to everyone up in the State House, in City Hall, across the business community. We literally took everyone a copy of the 10 Commandments that says, here's what we're striving for, here's what we need to have happen. And funders, for the first time ever in my career, funders called me. In particular,
Yes.
the Times Foundation, the Boston Foundation called and said, this 10 Commandments has caught the imagination of people. We want to give you some money. What do you need in order to execute? And we did. You need to execute kind of big ideas like that. You have to have an infrastructure. So they gave the Urban League money. We hired people that were the demandment coordinators, and their job was to get the demandments met. Their job was to continue to communicate on a regular basis. One of the important parts of something like that is that you have to keep communication going out. Any little success or any little progress made on any of the demandments, we announced it because we needed to keep the community engaged and excited about their ability to make this happen. And with each, it's kind of like, if you think about efficacy, with each success, oh man, we thought we could do this, and we worked it and worked it and worked it, and then we would get another demandment met, and our confidence around the ability to deliver for the community really did improve and increase over time. And all of the demandments were met. I forget exactly, maybe 8 months or so. I mean, it was, it took some time to do all of them, but they all they all were met. It even reached, I was in New York for a weekend with my mother and watching Cokie Roberts. I think this week was the national Sunday show. And she mentions, I'm sitting eating breakfast and she mentions, and the 10 Commandments is something that they did in Boston, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, that's us. So it caught the attention of some national people. John Jacob talked about it at the National Urban League Conference that July and gave the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts a shout out for its role. So, I mean, I actually, if I have to say, I thought it was brilliant. It was, it really was. It was a great advocacy move. It was, and it did concrete and specific things. If you remember at the time, they were trying to merge Bunker Hill Community College with Roxbury Community College.
Sure were.
One of the demandments was, no, we do not want Bunker Hill Community College merged with Roxbury Community College. We want to have a freestanding Roxbury Community College. And that merger did not happen. It stayed as it was, and now they're doing great things over there. So that was the 10 Commandments. It was an interesting initiative.
Well, we're so proud of that. You demonstrated collaborative leadership in that you took two of the giants in this movement and organized them together to do the work between the NAACP and the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, and both you leaders, both Diane and yourself at that time, along with Reverend Rivers. And so what a wonderful walk back through something that is so important even today.
Yeah,
so
really.
We appreciate you sharing a little bit about that. And so people ask me all the time when I'm hyping up your book, they're like, is the book only for somebody who is a C-suite executive, or is it something that is for rising managers? Who is she trying to reach with this leadership book?
Right. I think it's for everybody, really. I mean, I think someone who is entry level in their career might want to take a look at it just to see what some of the challenges look like, or some of the questions you need to ask yourself as you kind of ascend the professional ladder. Certainly for people who are in mid-management or in senior management in an organization, I think there are lessons to be shared there. If you're a new CEO, I mean, I certainly, of the 37 years I worked, I was 27 of them, I was a CEO. So there's no question that much of what I say in terms of my experience comes from the CEO perspective, because that's where I spent most of my professional time. But it's applicable to anyone. So I think it's written with these various lessons. It's 30 chapters, mini chapters, not even very long chapters that tell a story that really has happened to me and happened while I was working, that it illustrates a leadership principle. And you can pick it up and put it down. You can read chapter 3 and chapter 8, and then go back to chapter.
Start in the back and move to the front.
That's right.
And that is basically the sign of a great book, when you can do that. And when you talked about leadership earlier, you talked about even when you serve in the CEO role, having people around you that are incredibly brilliant and talented, and make it feel as if all the work is being done through them and by them, and those kind of creating that kind of synergy, and also being someone who's able to lead no matter where they are in the organization.
Right.
That's what leadership is all about. And so I was grateful to hear that. But what about mentors? Can you talk a little bit about mentors? Are there any that sort of stand out in your life, and or what do you think the impact of mentoring is on leadership?
Well, so there's a differences of opinion about whether mentors for women need to be women, mentors for men need to be men, or vice versa, or mix it up. It turns out, and I think it's largely because of the time in which I grew up, that I was often, most of the time, one of very few women in the room, and almost always the only person of color in the room. So, I kind of talk about my experience is not so much about gender discrimination.
Right.
It's about racial discrimination, because I walked through the room, not that I was a woman, but that I was African American was what stood out the most. in people's reaction to me. But so I digress. Anyway, so my mentors, because of the time in which I was leading, are all men. Hughie Jones, who used to be the dean of the BU School of Social Work, who ran for the state legislature at one point, taught at MIT. He was a professor of mine when I was in graduate school, and he also was on my dissertation committee at the Heller School. He and I got to know each other. I liked him. I thought he was great. He was very supportive. So he's been a mentor. I have never made a job change or big decision professionally that I haven't talked to Hughie about. So Hughie's one.
Sounds like a lot of us.
Sam Gerson, who was the chairman
Yes.
of Urban League for the first 6 years of my 11 years. He was the president and chairman of Filene's Basement. If all of you all remember the Thrill Is Gone commercials that were
That's right.
on television at the time. Sam was a fabulous person. He's now deceased, but he was a fabulous person. He believed that I could do anything, actually. And because he thought that, I thought that too. And there again is the confidence that got built in the ability to perform and do really well. But he was very supportive. He opened his Rolodex and he opened his checkbook on behalf.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
There's a story. I don't know if you can share it with us, but I remember when you demonstrated some incredible leadership. How did Sam get involved with the Urban League?
Yeah. Well, we had at the time. Were you on the board then with Gina?
I was on, but tell the story though.
So
because it shows your leadership and it shows what people need to do to step up and get something done.
Well, it's kind of funny. So we were looking for a new chairman. The Urban League needed. I was relatively new. The other chairman had retired. His term was up. And so it was now time. Okay, who are we going to get that's going to get this thing on its feet and really cooking? And we had two members of the board at the time that knew Sam Gerson, who was the head of Filene's Basement. Now, everyone knew Filene's Basement. He was a very a big time business guy in the community. He sold his suits to Mayor Menino. I mean, so he was connecting
to all of us on the board.
Everybody on the board. So we went out to see him. The offices were in Wellesley, and Gene Mahoney and Lee F. Jackson, who's unfortunately he died in the plane crash, but Lee. We went out to see Sam Gerson and we talked about the Urban League. I introduced myself. This is what we're looking for, this kind of leadership. So he listened very politely, nice guy. He says, okay, let me think about it. I hear what you're saying. I'm not saying no, I'm not saying yes, I want to think about it. So we leave. Gene and Mahoney go back to my office. Okay, look, we got to have this guy. What are we going to do? So we sat there and decided that we called a florist in town to send a bushel of bananas to Sam, which they did. A big thing of what I heard from the people in the company, this big basket with these bananas on the vine arrived in this basket with balloons coming all out of the top. And it asked him, would you be our top banana? And they delivered it to his office and he looked at it. He said, I'm in, call those people. I like that. Like their style. Call her. I'll do it.
You never know what it's going to take.
That's right.
To make something like that happen.
So he said yes, and the relationship was fabulous. I learned a lot. He was a caring, great guy. So he was a mentor. And then my third mentor, I would say, was a gentleman named U.T. Saunders, who sadly is deceased as well. But U.T. was a consultant that I met when I was at Head Start. He came in to do some work with us, and he was smart and just capable. He was one of the people that I mentioned earlier that could just tell you, you're full of it, Joan. That's silly. That doesn't make sense. That was just honest, brutally so sometimes, but honest with me.
We need those.
We need those. And he came to be a trainer and a consultant for me at every job I ever went to. Whenever I went, UT came along and he did diversity consulting with us. He did 3 strategic plans with me. And so, we became good friends, and he was very, very helpful to me professionally and also to the organizations that he came to help me with.
Yeah. So you mentioned diversity. So I can't let you get out of this conversation without talking about diversity in the workplace and more specifically leadership roles and how you see the current situation and what you'd recommend for organizations going forward, all those kinds of questions. If you can sort of unpack some of that for us.
Yeah, well, I have to tell you that the situation with George Floyd's murder, as it did for everyone, just kind of floored me, actually. I was just enraged by it. I just was so angry. I was so sad. I found that here at home, I could tear up, really quickly listening to any of the news. And then the protests broke loose across the nation in such powerful and visual ways. So it touched a chord with everybody. But I have to admit that and this is kind of the small blessing, maybe, if you want to call it, I hate to call COVID a blessing, but
Right.
a blessing to the remote work environment we're in now, is that if I had to return the day after the George Floyd murder to run the home, go to work the next day, I would have been so angry.
Right.
And I don't know if I'd have been able to interact appropriately. I'd had to be the leader, right? I'm coming in and I've got to lead this thing. But I got to tell you, it would have been very, very hard for me. And so I think one of the blessings of COVID and being home is that people did not have to, all people, leaders, worker, everybody, did not have to return to the job the next day. In many of the industries, and particularly in the service industry and other industries, didn't have to return to work and work with the person in the QB next to them the next day. And I just wonder how combustible that would have been at work, were we all physically back in each other's presence the next day. So the virtual life we're living gave everybody a chance to cool down, I think. I mean, I'm still angry, but to cool down, to settle in a little bit, and to process what had happened. And so I think to that extent, that's a good thing. However, we are going back to work one day.
Right.
And we're not going to be on Zoom for the rest of our lives permanently like we are now. And so companies, organizations really need to think about what is it they're going to do when people, all the various people, show back up on the scene, on the job. One of the things I think I could say I believe pretty clearly, is that Black folks are tired of talking. And they are, I know for me, I'm kind of talked out,
Right.
Years, I've been talking about this diversity, inclusion, for so long. I'm talked out. And I think the younger people, many of whom led the marches and the protests this time, they're not ready to keep talking either. So companies need to have some concrete plans of things that they're going to do once everybody hits the workplace again. And now that we're remote, start working on it, because Black and Brown employees are coming back on the job, and they're going to be watching, and they're going to be asking questions, and they're going to be demanding that certain things happen. Every organization and company I've ever worked in or know of has low-hanging fruit. There are things in every organization that everybody knows don't work so well. Things in every organization where that promotion did not go to the most deserving person, or the person of color was left out of that promotion. Nobody talks about it, but everybody knows about it. There are things in organizations that have not happened or that have happened that are not good, and leadership knows what they are. And so take 1, 2, 3, 10 of those low-hanging things and change them. Act. No more talking about it. We've talked about
Get
it.
on it.
Get on it.
Right.
Get on it and get busy and find out what needs to be done and go ahead and do it. And there's so many things that leaders have, at their fingertips, that they can make things just happen. In the, at the Urban League or in the nonprofit service sector, I mean, there's a board of directors, don't get me wrong, but the CEO has a tremendous amount of power. I mean, the CEO can say, no, we're going left, we're not going right. And that's kind of how it happens. I mean, there's not a whole lot of layers of, government's a bit different, but there's not a lot of layers of bureaucracy that need to be dealt with in order to make change. So my recommendation, particularly around diversity and inclusion, is get it done, act, change what needs to be changed. And then for the things that take a longer time to change, that really require infrastructure renovation or require much more in funding to get it done, do that too. Be working on that but make the immediate, small, low-hanging fruit changes now, and demonstrate to your employees and to yourself that you can make things happen for the better of your organization in this particular area.
So you're saying both and, not either or. You got to
No,
do it and start acting. Start acting. Don't. We're tired of talking. We're tired of analyzing, researching, all those things. You know, I love your book chapter titles. You know, titles like "Honor Your Roots" and "Charge Through the Crack in the Dough." Go ahead and take the risk. You talked about confidence earlier, so one of them is be confident. Adopt a growth mindset. Focus on your family. Find a community where you feel like home. I love that one. Teach children the lessons they need to learn. Take a stand. Just power through it. Lead anyway. When it feels like you shouldn't, just lead anyway. Hire wisely and provide support. Not just hire wisely, but make sure you're providing support. You also talk about watch, listen, learn, and model, and stick to your principles. You also say have the guts to do what's right. And that's important. And don't be so doggone well behaved. You know,
well-behaved women never make history.
right. Make your demandments, as you talked about earlier, and dare to make history. But you also have one titled Know Thyself. What do you mean by know thyself?
Well, actually, that chapter talks about my my tenure with the governor as his chief of staff.
Ooh.
And, you know, that was an interesting job. I was there for the 3 months of the transition and the first 100 days, so for a total of 6 months. And for those of you that don't know, you know, a chief of staff is what the governor says the chief of staff is. You know, there's no particular profile for the chief of staff. And when Governor Patrick asked me to would I be his chief of staff, I was like, oh, you mean like Leo McGarry on the West Wing? I mean, you know, like I had no idea what that really, really meant. And it doesn't have one definition. It's whatever the governor wants you to do. So he wanted my role to be to set up the governor's office, to hire all the governor's staff people, to hire the cabinet secretaries, to get the government up and running so that the first day after inauguration, we were smoking with grease and we were all in the State House at our battle stations to do the job. And so that's what I did. There's a whole other set of stories in the book about what it's like working under the Golden Dome, and the press and the challenges of working in government. But so that was my job. And I make 2 or 3 references in the chapter about things that I had to do as the chief of staff. And very soon I was like, this isn't for me. This is not the role that I play best. I did it well. We hired fabulous people. The cabinet secretaries were great.
You mean sometimes even the great Dr. Joan Wallace-Benjamin has to remix?
That's right.
What?
I had to remix. Remix. I had to remix.
Oh, man.
I love the governor. I love what we were doing. The people I was working with was great, but it just wasn't for me. The role wasn't for me. The press stuff wasn't for me. The legislative dynamic wasn't for me. And so when I think about, even when I was at the Urban League, frequently, a couple of times, I was asked to run for public office. Why don't you run for this seat?
Right.
I never wanted to do it. And after I did this stint, I know why I never wanted to do it. It was just not my thing. And so I decided I'm not going to stay here. You know, I'll talk to the governor. He and I will agree. And he certainly knew that some of the misgivings I was having, he understood them. And, you know, I had actually made some comments and we laughed about some things. So he knew that it wasn't my niche. And so I got a call to come back to the home for Little Wanderers. And I decided to take it. I'd go back. And the governor and I talk about our having breakfast at the Four Seasons. I told him what I wanted to do. He was like absolutely fully in favor of it. Thanked me for my service. And I went back, but I had to, when I say know thyself, you have to know who you are and know where you feel the most comfortable and where you, how you want to spend your time. I mean, we spend hours at work compared to anything else that we do. How can you be on a job and not love it? It's got to be something you love, something that floats your boat every morning, something that gets you bounding out of bed to go do the next day's thing. And if it's not, don't do it. I mean, I had friends who said,
There
"Oh,
you
if
go. There you go.
you leave, it'll ruin your career." I was like, what?
What?
My career? I'm 56, 7 years old. I mean, I've had a career. I came to do this to be helpful to the Commonwealth and to the governor. What career do you think it's going to ruin?
It's not my last great idea.
It's not my last great idea, or that I would be offending. Oh, you can't do that. You have to say, no, I do not believe that. I don't. I would say that to my children. And I say it to young people that I mentor. I said, we could have so many jobs in a lifetime that if this is something that you do not like and don't want to do, then do something else. And so knowing that about yourself is really, really important.
Well, we are so grateful to you for spending this last hour with us. It goes so fast when you come to Leaders Over Lunch. And we're so grateful to have somebody who knows how to fill up an hour with information. And so before we let you go, what is it that you hope this book brings to people? What was it that you, when you sat down writing this, said, I hope this is what happens when people read this book?
You know, I hope it brings people some ideas about how they may think about their own leadership. I hope it could provide some comparison in a way. Well, you know, Joan tried this and this is how that worked out. And boy, I had the same kind of situation. Let me see if there's a way I could do this, or mine worked out even better, or mine didn't work out as well. So, you know, I like people to just use it kind of like a guidebook in a way that sort of says, you know, here's how she thought about taking a risk and calculating risk. And how do you do that? Let me read about that. And so I hope people will just learn something. That, listen, there's no one way to lead, and there's no one right way to lead. Everybody does it differently because everybody comes to the party with a different set of experiences and exposures and values and principles, things they learned growing up. I mean, we're all different people. And so often you go on a job and you try and put away who you are, put away how you grew up and what you think and what you, well, you can't. You are who you are, and you can't bury that stuff. So rather than try and bury it, bring it with you and be conscious that, you know, my point of view about this situation is really being colored by this thing that happened to me when I was younger, or this idea and belief that I have, and decide to either reject it or say, okay, you know, my experience here makes some sense in making this decision. But don't try and make like your stuff is not on your back when you walk through the door, because it all is there. And so it's just to tell people to be conscious as they're walking through their life and their career about what you're doing. You know, just kind of breezing through life is really, it's too short. Believe me, at my age now, it's too short. It's too short to breeze. All right. And then you get to be my age and you're like, well, what have I done? And how have I done this? And you're now really too old to start all over again. So be conscious throughout the entire process and make adjustments and changes as you go. Hopefully you're growing and getting stronger and better as you go. And so that's what I hope people will take from it.
Well, we appreciate it. So speaking of taking from it, where can they get the book?
So my book is sold two ways. The first way is, well, one way is on my website, www.jwallace-Benjamin consulting.com, Benjamin Consulting, on all one word.com. And you can go to the bookstore. You'll see a thing up the top, bookstore, click on the picture of the book, and that it'll come up that you can order it and give your credit card number and do it that way. Or you can go on Amazon.com and buy a Kindle, buy a electronic book version of it. So those are the two ways. And then if you buy it on the website, I will sign it. And I will mail it to you. If you buy it on Kindle, I can't sign it. And
but we'll catch up to you when the you know, when everybody is healthy and ready to come outside, and we'll have a book signing, and you'll be able to sign them for
Right.
anyone who gets the book, either through us or through you, or
Absolutely.
as a gift, because they're a great Kwanzaa and holiday gift to
Right. If
give
you
for
have
the new year.
a young professional in your life that you think this could help, buy it and let them read it. I think it could be useful.
Someone said, write in how you can get the book, please, into the chat. All right. So I did look down and see that. So please write that into the chat for us. We want to thank you, Dr. Joan Wallace-Benjamin, for not only spending this time with us, but for your incredible leadership and sharing your talent, your time, and the treasure of your knowledge with us today.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. Anything for the Urban League.
Well, we are so grateful for that. And I find myself back helping because of individuals like you who lead and continue to lead. And so I want to thank our audience for tuning in and I want you to look out for our next Leaders Over Lunch series. But before we do, I also want you to become a member of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. You can do that by visiting our website, www.ulem.org, for more details. And now I also have a special guest who's going to ask you to donate real quick. And then So we're asking you to join the Urban League movement. I've had the honor of being part of that movement for almost 3 decades. I came to the Urban League right out of college, joined the board, and I haven't looked back since. We're also so grateful as a family to be able to be donors of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, because we believe that after 101 years of serving this community, the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts has gotten it right. They have a board of directors that are magnificent leaders. They're dedicated and they give their talent, their time, and their treasure to the organization. They have a staff of unbelievable professionals that are dedicated to this community, and they serve and they serve and they serve and they serve. We need you to become a member. Becoming a member means that you could be part of one of the most prestigious organizations in this country, but also you could become a part of one of the most incredible affiliates in this country, the Boston affiliate of the National Urban League. Become a member of our Urban League Guild and learn about some of the things that will help you as you grow, develop, and age. Become a part of our Youth Development Network, our Young Professional Development Network. When you become a part of that network, it's a group of your peers coming together, serving and making a difference in this community, doing things that matter for the future of this community. You can be a part of this movement. Find a way to join today. Donate at www.ulem.org. Our community, your community needs you. Let's all step up and donate to the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts today. Our children, our future are depending on it. Thank you, and everybody have a great afternoon. Thank you so much, Joan, for all that you continue to do. And to the entire team at the Urban League, thank you all so much for all of your support. William Watkins, Charles Stewart, Natalie, and also Uder, thank you so much for your hard work today to make this happen. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. See you at the next Leaders Over Lunch.